Hello, I'm Leslie Shankman. I am an ambassador and a guide for the Stellar Nations Cosmology, which comes out of Hungary. And I'm recording this in early May of 2024. And the year of 2024 in the Stellar Nations Cosmology is the year when the archetypical energies of two stellar nations are coming forth to impress on our collective unconsciousness to help us evolve these parts of ourselves. And we're talking about the stellar nation of the dragons and the stellar nation of the great felines. I've done videos about each of these, so there's background information, and those are linked below. But these are both nations that are considered warrior nations. And we don't have a true understanding of what a warrior energy really is. And that's what this video is about, because on a cosmic level, on a galactic level, these nations have gone through great trials and changes and created new energy patterns that are an incredible upgrade for us if we can integrate them here in our physical bodies as we live on this third dimension. And if we integrate these new energy patterns, they're avenues for us to evolve into a less polarized dualistic consciousness. They strengthen us, these new energy patterns, to understand how to hold, achieve, sustain a fourth, fifth dimensional consciousness and beyond. And since that's where we're going as a collective, our arc of evolution is moving in that direction, it's really helpful to have the mythic understanding that comes from the stellar nations about all these energy dynamics. And that's what we'll be looking at in this video. What is the new octave or new possibility that we can integrate that is a warrior energy, but isn't about us versus them, isn't about fighting? There's actually a much higher expression of what we call warrior energy. So with this exploration, we'll draw that out so that we can use it in our daily life. One of the first things we need to realize is that our planetary issues cannot be solved from a planetary level. It's time that we open up to expanding our view and perspective and realize that we live within a vastly immense organism, and this organism has consciousness and order. And we can do this by recognizing the stellar rays within ourselves, which we'll be explaining throughout this video. Because when we recognize the stellar rays that are integrated in us, we expand the planetary consciousness towards a stellar consciousness. And when we do that, we can recode our collective consciousness. Our whole collective can develop a different, broader perspective. We learn right away on page 17 of Volume 1 of Stellar Nations Soul Families, which offer the history chronicles of the Milky Way galaxy, that we are currently coming into a time when there's a possibility to experience a dimensional shift on a planetary level. And this is because the whole galaxy is experiencing a rearrangement, a reattunement, and a quality shift. And this shift is related to the concurrent ending of 3 grand cycles. And that would be the 26,000-year precessional cycle, the 230 million year orbit around the galactic center, and the entire Milky Way galaxy around the great central sun. So at this time, we're being called to establish a bridge of consciousness between our planetary process and the galactic processes. Our solar system on Earth, we have to realize, have been operating as a closed system, and our sun has been the orchestrator of this closed system. But this is now changing. It's really helpful to realize and appreciate that our sun has been the central directing and sustaining star, and as such has been the keeper and the sustainer of our solar system's integrity. Our sun emanates enormous light beams, and it's the focal point of our solar system. And it's our sun that generates a kind of special stellar solar field that acts as a unique morphogenetic field, which keeps the existence of the complete solar system in a specific unity. So prior to 2007, because the sun was essentially like a gate or an orchestrator that let in outside galactic energies from outside our solar system, the energies from the stars could only reach the inner planets in our solar system through the lens or filter of our sun as the orchestrator. But all that changed in 2007. As our solar system and our Earth has been entering into the fuller and fuller light of the photon belt, we have since 2007 been experiencing the great stellar channels, the stars in the galaxy, becoming more apprehendable to us. In other words, the sun isn't like a central filter anymore. These stellar channels have been coming in, surrounding us, and opening us to recode us with their information. And we've said in other videos, but I'll repeat it here, we can really understand that the stars are sentient beings. They are essentially composed of, or at least places where our soul particles live. So we have aspects of ourselves living all throughout the galaxy on a soul level. And we could think of the stars as the cells or organs of our larger light body. So those cells emit their information, and in essence, the light comes down, and it's like we have a huge circulatory system in a larger light body that is us. And as this process is continuing, this is what's starting the realignment of our solar system towards the great central sun. Now, this means something very specific for us, and I share what it means from the perspective of a book called Pleiadian Perspectives on Human Evolution by Amara Kuan Yin, and Bayananico trust and cite her work at different times. And she says basically what's happening is we're finishing one spiral arm of galactic processes, and we're about to be picked up on the next spiral arm. And what's happening is we're moving from the evolutionary spiral of self-discovery and exploration. And this has been a period, this last creation cycle we've been living through, where we've explored all the potentials of consciousness through the light and the dark, the light and the shadow. But what we're moving into now, having gained all that experience of the polarities of both sides, of understanding how to integrate the shadow to bring out the light, we're moving to the evolutionary spiral of self-mastery and completion. And in this creation cycle, it's now our time to step up and choose spiritual mastery and responsibility, because we're being invited to create and co-create our reality in this next evolutionary spiral. Now, why have we been living in our solar system as a closed system, not being able to apprehend our extended soul aspects, our multidimensional nature? Well, our solar system itself represents metaphorically the whole process of exploring our free will and lapsing, if you will, away from our original divine destiny, and then finding our way back through experiencing and through surrender and redemption. Redemption being the larger cosmic law that says you're always welcome back. We will take you back. But our solar system was formed when our sun, who is named Solana, as an angel star, was an eighth Pleiadian star. He was a little brother to the 7 Pleiadian sisters. And at a time when he was part of entering another Aquarian age, he was more in a analogous level of development to an adolescent. So he had that masculine adolescent kind of energy that, oh my gosh, I don't want to do what my fate is. He looked at his father Atlas, another Pleiadian star. His father Atlas really is a gear of evolution, holds steady to let the flow of creation come through. But Solana didn't understand that. He looked at Atlas and said, that is so boring. He's just standing there. So Solana roiled and roiled and roiled with such restive urges and such dreams to create a different fate. And eventually, all that pushing energy broke him out of his orbit and took him from his original divine destiny in a former Aquarian age. As Solana flew out from his orbit, he was absolutely ecstatic at first, dreaming his dreams and going towards a new fate. However, in line with cosmic law, he suddenly started to fall from his 6th-dimensional perspective down, 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 because when we leave our fate, which is really just the highest intention of the light inside of us, we've actually chosen our fate with our own free will. But when we leave that idea and go out to explore, we lose some of our consciousness. So the sun fell, and finally caught himself on the edge of the 4th dimension. Having lost his expanded consciousness, our sun was very bereft, very alone, and in a very cold, dark space for a long cosmic time. He basically went into a comatose state and pulled a great blanket of astral fog around him, which is actually why we experience the astral fog when we come into our incarnation on the earth plane. Everything that I'm telling you really is analogous to the process that we go through. So our sun is exemplifying in our solar system the same process that we go through. We're basically children of the sun. When we're incarnated onto the earth, we come through the gate of the sun. Now, all the while Solana was comatose, his Pleiadian family cried out with great love and tried to reach him. And eventually, when the part of the galaxy that he was in came into another age of light, coming into the photon belt, those whisperings of his family reached him, and he started to wake up. And the Galactic Council came forward, and with an act of grace, Solana was given a chance to lift himself back up. He was given the chance to walk the path of finding his full light or his divine destiny. And he was given that chance by creating and evolving our solar system. In Solana's enactment, in his creation of our solar system, each planet represents either a member of his Pleiadian family or an aspect of his psyche. And he, as he's been orchestrating our solar system, conducting the energies of the greater galaxy into our solar system and through the planets, he's been working his way back towards his divine destiny, which, remember, was to move towards being like his father Atlas. And his father Atlas was a force, is a force, that holds steady and acts like a gear of evolution, because Atlas manages the flows of energy that happen throughout creation and helps them move through. He doesn't hold anything static. He's actually this incredibly reliable, stalwart force, in the sense that he can stand there and channel all these moving energies so they can continue to move in creation. And Solana now is learning from having orchestrated the solar system that in fact is the nature of what his divine destiny or his fate is. And Solana is working his way into the full light of his being. And now here we are in 2024, and we're entering more fully into the photon belt, as well as into the dawning of a new Aquarian age. So you've got this whole introspection happening by our sun, and I've done different videos with David Farrell, we'll list them below, where we've looked at this year 2024 as our sun has had Kazimis or met with each of these planets, which represent pieces of his psyche or his Pleiadian family. And it's like he's reevaluating and, let's call it, adulting. He's looking at, now we are entering another Aquarian age, and he understands more deeply what his true destiny is and is trying to realign himself with that. But that's exactly the model of what we are going through as humans on Earth in our sun's solar system. As above, so below. If we're here, we're working out this same pattern that Solana is. So perhaps there's a bit of pathos here that we feel inside our own hearts, but we can feel for and with the consciousness of our sun, Solana. Solana wants to return to his Pleiadian family in this great cosmic rearrangement, but now he's essentially the father of our solar system, and he can't just leave us. He really needs us to go back with him. So that's part of the imperative and the push and the evolutionary arc that we're on, and what we feel happening inside and around us. So just like our sun Solana, we as cosmic humans are called to enter the gate of rebirth at this time. And with this background, we'll start to move into how the understanding of the maturation of the warrior part of us can help us do that. As I said earlier, we're called on to move from a planetary consciousness to a stellar consciousness. And it's now possible because since 2007, all these stellar rays are coming in more directly. But what we need to kind of do is flip our perspective. We are so in tune with ourselves as physical bodies, and we think as the stars and other things as being out there. But we need to flip it to realize that our physical bodies are an incarnational distillate of our larger light body. And our larger light body is expressed in the stars. So what I mean by incarnational distillate is it's literally like we are really our light body among the stars. Our soul aspects are living on different stars, and we choose to come into an incarnation and we pull down some of those soul aspects to experience and grow on the third dimension. So we're really not anchored in consciousness in just our physical body. We are truly having our loci of awareness in our broader light body, and then using our physical body and our third dimensional experience to hone the different aspects of our soul that live in the stars. This is really quite an exciting and empowering time, because as we come to realize this whole light body aspect of ourselves and realize that that's really the more true ongoing nature of who we are, we can use the Stellar Nations Cosmology, which maps all the different stars and the soul families that are inside of us, essentially our galactic DNA, and we can get our Antares code, which reflects our stellar remembering field, and we can know that we stand in the middle of our own stellar hologram. And when we do this and we know ourselves through the stars, it empowers us to pull the information from simultaneous timelines into each present moment. And doing this really starts to help us apprehend and live in our broader multidimensional nature that is beyond just the physical. It's important to realize, though, that stellar consciousness happens through the body. It's not about reaching up and out and leaving our body. Through our body, the whisperings from the stellar rays offer our body a way to interact with life, offer us a way to make choices, and they do so in a way that raises the octave of our form state. And particularly because the warrior codes of the dragon and the Great Feline Stellar Nations are our body codes. They literally, I did in the video on the Great Felines, I explained how we do carry our codes on a spirit level, a soul level, and a body level. So these warrior codes are body codes. So particularly for that reason, it's very empowering to understand how to raise the octave of our warrior codes, which I will be getting to pretty soon. But all this background is helpful for us to nest in, because the understanding really grows out of this contextual background. So to further this point and to anchor it, we can know that the stellar rays that project from our light body create a complex stellar field around us. And when we're born, we literally come in through the ethereal birth canal with this constellating around us. We're drawing these soul aspects to us by resonance, and they're matching what we want to do as an incarnational distillate. So when we're born, we're surrounded by a remembering field that does connect us to our galactic essential self. It connects us to the history of our existence, the trajectory of our consciousness. It's just that we haven't remembered this for so long, because we've been operating in the closed solar system, and we've been subject to the astral fog, just like Solana was when he first came to, before he created the solar system. And one more relevant point about this. Why do we even want to know the stellar forces? Well, when we can call something by a name, we become capable of having control over it, we can understand it, we can accept it. So if we get to know the stellar powers that are operating around us, in us, through us, and we get to know them with their qualities, we can apprehend the harmonizing and recoding forces that are sent by the celestials. In other words, these celestial or stellar rays get a meaning, and that opens a memory or revelation in our consciousness. And it opens a spiritual power that is related to these forces, and then it can work in and through us going forward. As we come to understand our larger light body, and we've named it through the Stellar Nations, soul families, and the stars, that we gain a real coherency. But it's very helpful to see that we have enlightened aspects of our beings on some stars, and we also have aspects that hold deep wounds of shadow and separation on other stars. I think there's our third dimensional tendency to think because it's up and out there and it's stellar that it must be accomplished, achieved, better than us, so to speak, down here. But that's not the case. On our light body, we've got a range of octaves from literally Christed aspects of our being to very fallen or shadowed aspects. And at this time in the arc of our collective evolution, as we've entered the light of the photon belt, we're being called on in this lifetime to bring the karmic lines from all our experiences as a consciousness forward for healing. So that's why there's so much happening. We're doing this so we can dissolve the shadows and move into a fifth dimensional consensus reality. When we become aware of who we are in the stellar realms, it gives us the opportunity in our daily lives to start to consciously live into the mastery of balancing and harmonizing this span of shadow and light that is within us. And this very much has to do with the way of the warrior, which we'll go into now, finally. The way that we've thought of the warrior aspect for millennia now is in terms of opponents, in terms of us against them, light versus dark, white versus black. On a cosmic level, as we've seen with the videos on the Dragon Nation and the work that's been done there, and the video on the Great Feline, this pattern has been evolved. Now, instead, the forces of the warrior are not used against something else, but they're used for the protection, for their original purpose of service and standing up for divine will and free will. And in being used for something, what's happening is the oppositional force is seen as a catalyst. And instead of pushing the energy out to wipe out the other, the energy is taken within to develop oneself to become more than. And essentially, it's because it's in service, it's drawing in light, and the light is making the warrior grow into a better and better version of themselves. And also, that light is essentially consuming the shadow. It's almost like using the shadow as a nutrient force. So these supreme beings have mastered a new energetic dynamic, And they're infusing their nations with this dynamic. And they're coming to the Earth plane in 2024 to invite us as cosmic humans to remember and reintegrate what they are, because they're really a part of us, but we haven't had them in us for a very long time. And the sobering truth is, this really all started so long ago when the cosmic humans felt superior because they were given a special mission to have all these nations inside them and to use these nations to co-create realities. And that superiority made them feel like they didn't want all these other forces inside of them. They wanted to discover who they were as superior beings. But we as humans weren't realizing that we were superior because we had this whole mix of energetic palette to create with. So, long ago, the cosmic humans were given control of the elements by the Creator as part of their co-creative nature, and the dragon nations was given control of the elements. So there came a war, and we think of it as the extinction of the dinosaurs on Earth, but it was an incredible battle of the elements with the humans throwing out forces and the dragons responding. And finally, the humans persevered, and the dragons were banished. In fact, all the stellar nations fell from the chalice of the cosmic human, and Gaia just cried out in pain, and a big split rent in her in the Pacific Ocean, and all the stellar nations fell into the center of the earth. And the human was left alone with our own wishes that we not be sullied by any of these other forces, and we discover ourselves on our own. And actually, we need to know that this is the first or one of the biggest karmic lines that we're asked to bring forward and solve now. That's why we're all about coming into a group consciousness and learning balance and harmony and accepting all the diverse parts and unifying them. We rejected that which was actually our fate as cosmic humans. And isn't it interesting to think that in this grand alignment, now that we've discovered the polarities, the opposites, the light and the shadow, which are a result of creating this separation and making either or scenarios, now we're finishing that creation cycle, as I said much earlier, and we're about to be taken up on another spiral arm where we're asked to be masters and co-creators of reality. Essentially, we have the opportunity to come back to our original fate, and it's our warrior aspect that can help us with that. In the earlier videos I did, and you'll see the links below, about the history and story of the Great Felines and of the dragons, you will recall that we have new grandmasters for each nation who have healed much and brought forth a new pattern. It's also interesting to think about when we reflect on that we as cosmic humans pushed out the dragons so long ago, that essentially then that part of ourselves had no place to really be held, to be contained, to carry out their mission within an ecosystem or a chalice. We weren't holding that anymore. So you could say that maybe that's why some of the aspects of ourselves went kind of rogue. Maybe that's why the dragons were unbalanced and got power hungry. And then with that power hunger, they pushed out the feminine by pushing out the Great Feline. So it all starts coming around to realizing, as we clear these karmic lines, that there's rolling spirals of different causations that are driving these karmic patterns in our Milky Way galaxy and in us. And when we talk about bringing all the karmic lines forward, as I've said a few times, this is just another angle of understanding what we're doing. We are unraveling not just personal karmas, but whole kind of species karmas of our archetype as cosmic humans. So how do we as humans reintegrate all these forces inside of us and understand them and use them at the highest? And the warrior is a very potent force to reintegrate, especially if we understand the higher octave of the warrior. So I'm going to read this quote from Stellar Destinies, which gives us some insight into the higher octave of the warrior. And then when we've got that placed, we'll look at the more practical application of this idea in our daily lives. So, to quote from Stellar Destinies, sublimating the emotional motivations and the perfect control of the thoughts are essential for enabling the warrior to go beyond themselves, to reach the gate of spiritual spheres. So we've got to be able to control the emotions and our thoughts. The way of the warrior, which resides in the invisible, is about equalizing polarities. The warrior's objective is to create a sustained alchemical balance between the polarities in this world. It's what I was talking about before. Instead of using the polarities as oppositional forces, it's about coming into a balance of polarities, and from that place create the way forward with the balance. So how is this done? With a sacred motion and with a movement of mystical power, the warrior will overcome and defeat the projected shadows with the light awakened within and from the tranquility of the center. And I kind of said that and mentioned it before by talking about working for something, for a higher principle, and developing yourself constantly to be good enough to raise yourself so that you can serve that principle. Now we'll go on to look at some of the practical ways we can think about instilling this in our days. As I mentioned, the dragons and the cosmic humans were both given control of the elements. And this is the pathway, in fact, of the dragon initiation. 8 very specific steps, and the first 5 of them have to do with mastering the elements on a physical level and a metaphysical level. And this is what we can look to as humans now to realize ourselves as warriors who want to work for something, for a higher principle, who want to integrate and bring in the new pattern that has been established cosmically. When the Creator gifted us as cosmic humans with the elements, we were reminded that the life of the planets we were also given to live on are kept in motion by common united work of the forces of nature and the elements. And the Creator said to the humans, I lay the elements in your hands. I entrust you with all the living forms of the water and the lands. But you should be aware that they will all be your mirrors. So let's reflect a minute. If we're told that the elements working together with nature are the mirrors for us on our planet and are mirrors of how we're managing the elements, what does that tell us about us, given the state of our ecology and our thoughts and everything else? It basically tells us that we've lost all relationship with the elemental nature of our own selves, of the planet, and we need to understand that. And we need to understand that our bodies are one with the body of Gaia. So let's look at each element to see what it is that it is in its purity and its power, and how is it that if we're not using it properly, it reflects back to us that misuse. The earth element is about honoring our body. And that's because we need to awaken the enormous physical vitality that we have. And we need to understand that life is a choice. And when we do this and awaken and use our physical vitality for the choice of life and engaging with life, we're acknowledging our own power and also the power and resources of our Mother Earth. And when we can do that, we can not only heal our own bodies by this honoring and awareness, but we can balance the body of the earth. Understanding and using the water element is all about sacred movement, the sacred movement of flow. Because what we're going for is a balance. We want to have the flow of peace running along to silence the negative emotional energies within us and within the world. Because the water element means the harmony of emotions at its highest. And we need to realize and create this balance and radiate it out to the world. We need to feel the freedom of the water element and know that that freedom is greatest when it doesn't flood. It actually needs to be controlled. It's a little ironic. The freedom of the water element to flow needs the control of the emotions so it doesn't overwhelm in a flood. The fire element awakens in us our intellect and our human will. And we need to use our intellect and our human will to tame the devastating power of fire. When we do that, we can put fire in the service of protection rather than running amok into devastation. Fire inside of us is also the courage to overcome fears and doubts and to overcome all the confusing and oppressive, offensive things that are around us. Fire is even about confronting and overcoming astral presences. So we want to awaken to the power of fire, but we use it to have a brave soul and conquer darkness. We use fire to tame anger and tame our harmful emotions, rather than letting fire be a devastating rampage. The air element gives us the ability to control our impulses and our mind and our thoughts. it gives us the ability to convey our intellect and our spirituality. With the balance of thoughts, we can create peace. And when we can do that, we can go further and not only clear our own self with a peaceful attitude and feeling, but we can clear the atmosphere. We can drive out different astral energies from the earth plane and from the stratosphere. Traditionally, the right to use, control the elements and have them as an initiation pathway was the purview of the dragon warrior, not necessarily the great feline warrior. But I think we can say that's changed a bit, because we saw when Myanmar Ankh, as the great goddess queen that went to help the final healing of the great felines in the Andromeda galaxy, she brought them up to an incredibly high octave. She trained them in using all the inner forces so that they could anticipate, as warriors, how they would approach the despotic rulers, because the great feline is all about independence, free will, sovereignty for those who are being quashed, for those who are not allowed to practice their belief systems. And the great feline had the problem, one of the parts of its downfall was that the independence of cats meant that they really couldn't come into coherency as a group. But Myanmar Ankh evolved all that. She helped them understand how to be coherent within themselves and then with each other. So really now, the kind of training that we're talking about of mastering these elements, especially metaphorically, I think is something that's also become the province of the great feline. So we can call this really, this mastery, a warrior aspect of being. And that's the higher aspect of the warrior that we're trying to move into. The mastery of all the forces towards holding up the greater good, towards holding up what our mission is. Bayononical learned in 2012, which was the year of the bears, and the bears are teachers of Christ consciousness. They learned that a new warrior strain had been developed. And that has to do with the concept of Christ consciousness, which was a relatively new concept introduced as a frequency into the thought field of our planet, particularly in a big way 2,000 years ago when the Christ consciousness came in the incarnation of Jesus. And that was a very dark time on Earth. And his coming at that point was to bring in the new frequency, and in fact to especially lay in the frequency of divine law, to help us remember divine law, which in fact is really what the dragons were meant to protect in the first place, divine law and order. Because we had really lost the idea of divine law. And the way that that was planted then, very specifically, is Jesus and Mary Magdalene had an actual child in Sarah, and Sarah held the frequency of divine law, and then there was a Christed bloodline literally within humanity that started to hold and anchor that frequency of divine law. So this Christ consciousness frequency has been coming into flourishing over the last 2,000 years, and we're at a time now where it's blossoming because we're coming into the light of the photon belt, and all this is waking up. What is the Christ consciousness? It's really the ability to hold oneself in the frequencies of the fifth, sixth, seventh dimensions, the dimensions where the laws of polarity don't work the way they do on the third dimension, which is equal opposite, yin, yang. You create light, it creates an equal amount of dark. It's very hard on the third dimension. All we can really hope for on the third dimension is to lean towards the light. When we move into the fourth, fifth dimension and up, the laws of polarity change, and increasing light decreases the shadow. So what we have here in the Christ soul coming along, he actually found the dragon warriors who hadn't left the fold. They didn't go with Khan and revolt. They wanted to stay true to their mission, but they didn't really have a way to express anymore because the overall Gestalt wasn't holding this idea of divine will within our societies in the same way. So what the Christ did was actually gave these warriors who were wandering and lost and vacant without a purpose, gave them a new purpose. But the purpose was to protect the temple. And by the temple, we mean to protect this idea of Christ consciousness. And to do that involves the use of the heart. So it's a whole different angle and perspective on being a warrior. So we can see that the warrior archetype has really evolved in many ways on a cosmic level. What can we do to embody our warrior codes? Remember the quote before, warriors create a sustained alchemical balance between the polarities of the world. Warriors know how to come into the center to find peace and to act from there. Because what happens with the warrior, the fifth virtue that the dragon learns especially, is the balance of motion. And that essentially is the ether element, perhaps. That teaches us how to move the forces that are awakening from the elements, from the fire, air, water, and earth. And we awaken to how to move them according to the situation at hand. So if we're in relationship to what's happening and balancing all those forces, we can bring in a very clear, precise sequence of movements. And our soul basically is moving in tandem with its fate. The divine forces are just sort of pulling us along those channels because those are the channels that we're meant to be in. There are our own channels of light. So we could think about the fact that we as humans, we're giving the incredible gift to be sensate. And that's why we have bodies, and the senses are our ability to interact with the environment around us, but essentially that means to feel and know and be and use the elements. So to be sensate is just about having that interface of sensations to know the balance of motion. It's the way we interact with the flow of life. And I think it's really important to realize that enjoying the senses like this is not the same thing as being emotional. Being emotional, emotion, it's motion with something stuck on it that's keeping it in a lower octave. I mean, sure, we learn from our emotions, but really what we're saying is it's time to master them. It's really a time to come into great mastery. So to recap in a simplified way some of what we've just drawn out, the essence of the warrior frequency lies in our power, our power is in our choices to choose truth, to dream bravely, to use divine destiny as our navigational tool, and to develop ourselves from aiming for our purpose. And to do all this, we master our emotional body and our thoughts. So when we as cosmic humans integrate all the different energy of the stellar nations that are us, when we become aware of our stellar aspects, of our soul aspects, and start to use them in our everyday life, we are essentially realigning with our original divine destiny. And with that understanding, I'll finish with this quote from Stellar Destinies. We know what an enormous treasure the catharsis of realizing our destiny is, which simply dispels the fog, clears the energy-draining missteps out of the way of our everyday life on our third-dimensional Earth living space, and gives our lives a much clearer, stronger foundation. We can stand in our days with a well-defined purpose and direction because we know where we came from and what mission code can guide us in this life as we work for the possibility of stellar and planetary ascension. Unraveling our karmic destiny on a personal level is extremely important for each of us to do. We must let go of self-harming cycles and constantly approach the vibrational level of I am who I am and Christ consciousness. And this is what our warrior nature can bring to us if we engage with our warrior nature on the highest evolved octave that's now being offered to us. There's not too much more to say after all of that. Now it's about doing and being. And I thank you for being here, for listening, and for taking up your stellar codes. So let's go forth and multiply, and namaste. Be well.